In order for us to understand what does it mean to square root or cube root a number, we have to understand what does it mean to square or cube a number. To square a number, write this down. To square a number, write this definition. You multiplying a number by itself twice. Multiplying a number by itself twice. But to cube a number, you multiply a number how many times? 3 times. You multiply a number by itself thrice or 3 times. Right. That makes sense. It should make sense. So to square root from this here. I'm leading the definition from what does it mean to square. Right? Because a square and a square root are basically inverses of each other. They undo everything. Right? I'll explain what do I mean by inverses. Right? The square root. In fact, you know what? Write it next to each other. Write it next to each other. Square root. Right, and I want you to write this down. This is a question that you need to ask yourself. To square number means to multiply a number by itself twice. To square root a number, this is what you're asking yourself. Right, write this down. Is the same as asking the product of what two same numbers will yield the number under the square root. So to square root means, or is similar to asking the product of what two same numbers will yield the number under the square root. The product of what two numbers will yield the number under the square root. And for the cube root, see, to cube means to multiply a number by itself thrice. So to cube root is the same as asking the product of what 3 same numbers will yield the number under the square root. So the product of what 3 same numbers will yield the number under the cube root. And I want you to write that down. Okay, so basically this is what we're saying. See, 2 squared gives you 4, right? Because 2 times 2 will give you 4. So the product of 2 and 2 will give you 4. If I put the square root of 4, I'm asking the product of what 2 numbers will give you 4. The answer is 2. The product of 2 will give you 4. That's what the square root is. If the cube root is 2 cubed gives you 28, then the cube root of 8 is the same as asking the product of what 3 numbers will give you 8. The answer is 2. Right? Do you understand that? That is basically what we are saying. And just as a bit of additional information, you see here where we said the number under the cube root, the number under the square root? What that is called, it's called the radicand. That's something that we will use next year. A term that we will use next year. Now I need to elaborate on the square root a bit more deeply. But for now, I just want you to see the idea of what we are saying. We are basically saying that when you take in the square root, you need to ask yourself the product of what 2 numbers will give you the number under the square root. And when we take in the cube root, we have to ask ourselves the product of what 3 same numbers will give you the number under the square root. That's basically what we are doing, right?